G'day everyone, welcome to Author on Author Interviews. My name is Lachlan Peary and today I'll be interviewing Carl Perry, a young Australian author who's published two crime novels with Penguin Australia titled The Deep and The Bluffs, which is here. You can find his two books in most bookstores across Australia, so I'm stoked to have Carl on my show today. But without getting ahead of myself, I'd like to welcome Carl Perry. Thanks heaps for joining me today.
Thanks, man. It's good to be here.
So before I talk about your books, I'd like to ask a couple of questions about you as an author. To start off with, how old are you and when did you first decide to become an author?
So I'm 31 and I first made the decision I wanted to be definitely a writer of some sort. Was pretty early, and I remember having these thoughts in primary school that you decide pretty early on that you have to choose that thing you want to be when you grow up. Like everyone asks you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you forecast what your life's going to look like. And there was this really pivotal moment for me in grade 6 where I was reading a series of books by Tamara Pierce. She writes fantasy novels, like teenage fantasy. She was pretty popular back then. She still is. And I loved her series so much, I sent her an email. And the reason I remember this as a moment is because I said in this email, love your books, love your characters, love this part of, the world you've built. One day I want to be an author as well, just like you. And I remember really vividly her response, because she kind of said at the start of this response, I get a lot of emails and I don't always reply, but I wanted to reply to yours because I was quite charmed. And I think you've got what it takes to be an author. And so for me, grade 6, getting that reply wasn't the moment I decided I wanted to be a writer or an author, but that was the moment that I can remember really solidifying it for me, like a bit of a pivotal moment. And so from that moment on, it's been my goal, almost to the exclusion of all else, was to one day be a published author.
Yeah, awesome, man. So tell me a bit about your background. Where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I grew up in a tiny country town in the northwest of Tasmania. So Tasmanian, born and bred. I think we're both sides, mum and dad are like 6th generation Tasmanians from the convicts. Grew up in the bush. Really great space to have a childhood. So nice low-key primary school, lots of outdoor time, really cool teachers, really cool kids. I spent a lot of time roaming the back paddocks, spent a lot of time on my bike, around the dam and down around the footy ground, and really good. And then the local town or the local city was Burnie, which I say city, but I think it only has about 18,000 people. So technically doesn't class as a city anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, grew up nearby there. So definitely a small town boy. And then when I wrote my first novel, when I first wrote The Bluffs, my first published novel, I was still in that same town. I was working at one of the local high schools. So even though I'd done a lot of travel and even though I'd done a lot of like exploring, I was still like, that was my home base for a very long time. And I owe it a lot for the writer I've become.
So this is just getting a bit off topic from my questions, but when did you start writing your first book, The Bluffs?
Oh man, I don't know. It's a good question. I wrote it, I want to say, I think it took about 3 years from the first word to the publishing date. And it got published July 2020. So what's that, 2017 stuff maybe?
Yeah.
I think I started writing it. But I will preface that by saying what a lot of readers and up and coming writers don't factor into their time calculations when thinking about how long it takes to write a book is that you spend an enormous amount of time waiting for other people to get back to you on
Yeah.
stuff.
Oh,
So
yeah.
in this case, I didn't have an agent yet, but I had my agent interested, but she was very busy and it's quite a lot for her to sign a new client. So we entered this really slow dance around each other. And when I say slow, there would be 6 months between me sending an email versus her replying.
Mm,
So I factor all of that into saying how long did it take to write?
mm.
I say 3 years. But if we talk about it in more concrete terms, I wrote the first draft for the Bluffs in 3 months.
Awesome, man. I like it.
Yeah.
So, as your writing career has progressed, what's been your idea of literary success?
That's such a great question, Lockie. Like it depends on, for me, success has been pretty crucially linked to the lifestyle I can live
Yeah.
in terms of this. And so I don't mean lifestyle as in lifestyle of the rich and famous, but like writing is my favorite thing to do. So
Mm,
for me, success is having time to write
yeah.
and paid to write and being able to talk about writing and to be able to like use all my books as tax deductions. Like that's part of the success for me. But I think it's also probably I need to acknowledge the fact that I've had an enormous amount of success.
Mm,
Been very lucky. I've worked bloody hard for it. Like I definitely worked hard,
mm,
but I'm really lucky with the team I've got. That my book hit the right tone at the right time. That the Instagram community came alongside. That Tasmania came alongside. COVID came into it. So I had a lot of lucky situations, and then I just had a really cracking good book. So
mm,
I've been like kind of near the top of
mm,
success in terms of what I could put a metric on.
yeah.
So if I hadn't achieved that, my definition of success would probably be quite different. I'd probably say, oh, I want to be nominated for Book of the Year, or I want to, hit a best. I want to be in the charts.
Mm,
Because I've already hit all that. Um, my kind of metric for literary success as a human is where do I fit this into my lifestyle?
mm,
Whereas if we want to take that to a bit more of maybe more of a abstract philosophical answer, literary success is very much about being authentic.
mm,
And I don't mean writing true and memoir, but definitely being authentic to your own lived experience and being authentic to what it is to be a human and being authentic to the message that you have inside of you that no one else does.
yeah.
And you can see that in some writing. Like there's certain writers, artists, singers that they're touching something about what it is to be human.
Mm.
And if you can do that and have a successful story, that's like almost the very definition of what it is to have literary success.
Awesome, man. I love that answer. So how many hours a day, or week, do you spend writing?
Look, I'll give you some insight, and I'm pretty open about this. I have a learning disability with numbers.
Yeah.
I have dyscalculia. So it's kind of like dyslexia, but with numbers. And how it presents for me is any kind of number fact, no idea. So you'll see how I stopped before to think, how long did I take to write this book? I've been asked that question so many times, but I will never remember. And so when you ask me questions about how long I spend writing, I
Yeah.
have no idea. But
True.
um, it's a it's a long time.
Mm,
Um, it's it's kind of on and off,
yeah.
and it depends what stage I'm in.
Yeah.
So at the moment, the stage I'm in is I have a really rough draft of about 50, 60,000 words. I need to go through and flesh that out to about 90,000 words for my publisher. Those are just arbitrary numbers. That's what I'm aiming for. I might not hit them. And so the process is a lot more in depth because I've got the framework already.
Yeah.
So my times when I'm writing that, like I can sit down for a session and it's easy for me to sink 5 hours in and not even be aware of it because everything's already there. It's not hard. It's just fleshing it out.
Mm,
Whereas if I'm writing the first draft and I don't know what's about to happen, then the writing periods can last maybe 2 or 3 hours.
mm,
Stuck. instead of just bullying your way ahead, you just go do something else, do my
Yeah.
other job or go for a walk.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely dependent, but hours at a time is normal and pretty crucial when you're operating at this stage or this level.
Yeah. So, is there a particular genre or theme that you like to focus on?
Mm, themes. I like to one theme that's recurrent in my first two books and will be recurring in my third is I have a great passion for people who use or people who have a dependence on drug and alcohol. It's my
Mm,
other day job. Big advocate in that space. And part of the reason I wrote The Bluffs with my main character Murphy being a cannabis dealer was because I had this really pivotal moment when I was working as a counselor in a rehab where I had this encounter with a client that reframed the whole way I saw people who use drugs.
mm,
Growing up in a small country town, pretty sheltered, awesome family, but like I'd never touched drugs, never even seen them. So I had this real demonized view, this really kind of specific criminalized view of what drug users were.
mm,
And then I was like, my whole world flipped upside down. And I thought, man, you're a legend. Like, you're a good guy. You got awesome character, good skills. Like, you've obviously used them pretty like dysfunctional way, but like, you're a good
mm,
person. And
mm,
so when I sat down to write The Bluffs and to a greater extent The Deep, and now working on The Wild, implementing it too, I really want to reframe the way that people who use drugs are seen. I want to reframe the way that people who experience the justice system are seen, or people
mm.
who engage in criminality.
Yeah.
That's a big theme for me and something that will likely carry on through my crime books.
Awesome, man.
Yeah. And then the other stuff and other themes that are important to me is the wilderness and the landscape and having nature have a really pivotal key in my books.
Awesome, man. I like it. So, final author-related question: if you could do, and this is a bit different, man. If you could do something as a teenager or young adult to become a better writer, what would you do?
Get um either get like a counselor or even a life coach, and this costs money, so you got to try and choose the right one, but get someone that will help you be okay getting feedback.
Yeah.
So the biggest issue people have with getting better at writing um, is the fact that people forget writing is communication.
Mm,
At its base level. Like, yes, it's an art form, it's a craft, it's a science, it's a philosophical outlet, but it's communication. And
mm,
the only way to communicate better is to get people to give you feedback on where you don't make sense.
yeah.
This is an issue for writers because there is a real tendency to see our writing and ourselves as the same thing.
Mm,
So when you've got that mentality, which is normal to begin with, if I critique your writing, you see that as a personal critique.
mm,
So to make an intentional step to separate those two, to say I am me and my writing is not me, it's completely separate to me. It takes kind of some coaching, takes some counseling. You need someone to help you work through that. And
mm,
then once you're in that state, you can get good critique, you can get feedback, you can actually go out and get people to help you become better.
mm.
Because it's not the best advice I can give is get feedback on your writing, but like no one's going to do that because it's too scary and it hurts. So
Yeah.
the better feedback is to say, go get some therapy in a good way, like
I
get
like
a
it,
bit more
man.
comfortable and learn how to separate those two.
Yeah. That's awesome advice, man. I need to get some counseling.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. So getting onto your books now, I'd really like to ask a couple of questions about The Deep specifically because I really love that book. It's my favorite of your books.
Thanks.
So when and where were you first inspired to write The Deep?
So I was first inspired to write The Deep when I was living in Hobart at the time. The Bluffs had come out, and I'd won a 2-book deal. So they were expecting me to go write a second book, and I didn't have any specific ideas, but I knew I could do it.
Mm.
And what I wanted to do was to write something so different to the Bluffs they couldn't be compared.
Yeah.
Because the Bluffs was so successful, you get real paralyzed by like not thinking you can back it up. So what I decided was I wanted to write a book that's opposite. So okay, what's the key events in the Bluffs? Girls go missing. So I thought, all right, the opposite of that is boys come back. So I thought, all right, I'm going to write a story about a little boy returning from being kidnapped.
Mm.
So that was how I came up with the first idea. That then had a natural progression because I was working in a rehab with some pretty hardcore dudes, hearing some really hardcore stories, definitely Breaking Bad level things.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated. I'm like, I wanted to learn more and explore that. So I had, okay, boy coming back, learning a lot about the criminal drug industry. Then the third thing that coalesced this into a story was I was driving, just went on a day trip, um, and I drove up to Eagle Hawk Neck, which is where the book is based. And when you're driving up to Eagle Hawk Neck, it's a great place in Tassie. It's got all those awesome landmarks, tessellated pavement, Devil's Kitchen, the Blowhole, Tasman Arch, stunning, stunning. Cape Hoy, beautiful area. And as you're driving into Eagle Hawk Neck, there's one final hill before it flattens back into the ocean. And there's this lookout to the left, and you come over the top of this hill. It's all trees and kind of dark because they're tall trees. You veer left, you come out to this lookout where there's always this espresso truck, and that view is just like literally breathtaking. You're
Mm.
like, wow, like you just want to stop and take it in.
Yeah.
And so that first moment of going on a day trip by myself, headphones on, listening to Spotify, coming into that lookout to get a coffee, seeing that view and thinking, this is where my book's going to be. And so those three elements combined were just what I used to start playing around. And then, yeah, the deep came out of it.
Awesome, man. I love it. So, do you plan out your books or do you sort of just let it sit down? Do you sit down and just sort of let it rip?
I let it rip. Yeah, I let it rip.
Awesome,
So
man.
I'm not very good at planning and
Yeah.
plotting,
Yeah.
um, to my own detriment, because I waste an inordinate amount of words because I don't plot. So I just start writing and see what happens. And then I send it to my agent or publisher and get their feedback. And then I have to cut out like 30,000 words and
Yeah.
rewrite it. But I lately, in this current draft of The Wild, I did plot it, only because I'd spent maybe a year and a half. Does that sound right? I don't know if that's right. Writing it already.
Mm.
That doesn't sound, that's too much. Anyway, I'd spent a lot of time writing it and I just wasn't getting anywhere. And the feedback I was given by my editor was, you've got really good ideas, Kyle. Like no one's questioning that, but you kind of write yourself into a corner because you just pick an idea and run with it. Whereas he said you should probably choose, of all the ideas you choose, pick the ones that better suit your character.
Mm.
Now, this makes perfect sense once he worded it up, and it's kind of echoes feedback they've been trying to give me for ages, but I didn't understand. um, and so once I had that in my mind, that then changed the way that I plotted The Wild, because I took everything I'd already written and this hole I dug myself into.
Mm.
I thought, all right, who are my characters again? What's their emotional arc? What's their kind of character growth? Where do they start? Where do they end? All right. Well, I recognize now where I've gone wrong, because this here is the moment when they're now pursuing lessons they already know.
Mm.
So rather than going through something to challenge something they haven't learned yet, I've just put them in the exact same situation as they first encountered, just put a different face on it. So recognizing the emotional energy is so different, recognizing that books are essentially emotional clockwork mechanisms. They're designed to invoke a certain emotion in people.
Yeah.
I needed to then replot that section so that I could actually bring my character back into a situation where him and my reader had the opportunity to experience his growth.
Awesome, man. I like it. Refining your craft after all the success you've gotten. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So, is there particular writers or artists that you look to while writing to help you inspire your work?
No, no. I mean, well, okay. It depends on how we frame inspiration. So there's lots of different elements to writing. That's why it's the best,
Mm,
absolute best craft there is. It's so full of everything that makes us human. And
mm,
so when it comes to things like character, I don't need to turn to other artists or writers because I work in a job that puts me in front of characters.
yeah.
There are times when I might mine Netflix for interesting characters, but generally that's pretty set.
Mm,
In terms of prose and the writing itself, I absolutely look to certain artists for inspiration. So when I was writing this latest draft, I started rereading the whole Harry Potter series.
oh, awesome.
Yeah, right from the start, and I had a notes on my phone to write down really interesting descriptions she uses. Because
Mm,
I mean, if you read Harry Potter, a lot of people get red faces. So they got like red cheeks, red ears, his neck's gone red. A lot of like Ron goes red, Hermione goes red, Harry talks about getting red. And you don't see that in many other descriptions. People rarely talk about the blushing thing.
mm,
So that really stuck out to me. I thought, I don't think I've ever really written about a character blushing, but it tells so much. So
yeah.
I started keeping this note on my phone just to track some of these good descriptions. I finished that, and then I started rereading The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss,
Mm,
which is one of my absolute favorite series as well. And his prose is genius level in terms of what he gets across in a simple phrase, the poetry of it,
mm,
the just the rhythm.
mm,
Um, Description stuff not as strong as J.K. Rowling, but in terms of rhythm of prose, really good. So by immersing myself in those two books, I was able to draw out some really good stuff about prose. Um, and then the third element, so if I talk about character, prose, and then if we talk about story, I don't really look to any other artists for inspiration there, but I do look to a lot of story writing books.
yeah.
So I have a lot of resources that I draw on. So I'd argue that they're artists that I'm getting inspired by.
Awesome.
Um, yeah.
Do you think this is getting off topic again? Do you think you have your books in terms of movies? I tend to do this. Do you do the same or?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. It's a cinematic. I think when you're writing thriller, the cinematics of it stick out anyway.
Yeah,
But I
definitely.
absolutely have always gotten that in my mind. It's always been the goal to get something on screen.
Yeah.
So that's yeah, that I do have that in mind. Um, I think that there's moments where I've had to um there's been moments where I've had too much visual description and
Mm,
nothing else.
yeah.
So sometimes that mentality is not helpful in a book
Mm,
because you need to inhabit more than just your visual senses and your hearing senses. So um, there's been times I've had to pull myself out and see it more as like imagining myself walking down the street. But the idea of seeing them as cinematic is pretty key to any form of success in a book because they're visual. I mean, we try
yeah.
and pretend they're not. We
Mm,
try desperately to pretend books aren't visual, but they are visual.
yeah, exactly. So tell me a little bit about the themes in the deep. What type of feelings were you trying to evoke from your writing that book?
So I really wanted to evoke, I wanted to reframe the character of Mac. So Mac is an ex-drug dealer. He went away to prison. He's out now on bail. No one's given him a chance. He was inspired by several of my clients and a friend that I met through a client just to talk about how hard it is to rehabilitate.
Mm,
It's not a simple matter of stopping something, it's like, well, society no longer has a place for you. How are you expected to be rehabilitate when you've got curfews? And anyway, I wanted to explore that and have him be the hero, and just kind of take readers on that journey. Um, I really wanted to explore family and loyalty. And I definitely wanted to explore masculinity, because my three point of view characters are at three very different stages. So they're three males: young Forrest, 30-ish year old Mac, and then Ahab, who's probably like in his 40s or 50s. And they're different life stages and encountering different things. But at the end of the day, a lot of it is about, who am I on this planet?
Yeah.
Who am I as a man on this planet? So I wanted to explore that, but definitely at no moment was I framing The Deep as an issues book.
Yeah.
So even though there's a temptation for me to do that because I work in this space, I definitely wanted just to tell a really good story and then hopefully have some characters doing some human things along the way.
Awesome, man. So, did you find you changed at all as a person while writing The Deep? Was there any new things you discovered about yourself in the process?
Definitely would have had a moment where I realized more from the readers' responses. Is early on, one of my beta readers, proofreaders, said, "Kyle, no one wants to read about a drug dealer. Like, they're not.
Mm.
Why is he the hero?" And I was pretty like concerned. I was offended, but I was like, it was my sister actually who said it. I was offended.
It's always the family.
Yeah, because she was pretty blunt, and I'm like, this is what it's all about. Like, you need to. He's the hero. And so, I kind of I sharpened some other stuff and smoothed some of his edges. But I didn't change that much. But I just put him in a few more situations where people could see the real him.
Yeah.
And what has been great is just been people's response to that character. And it really, when you work in the space I work in around advocacy and drug and alcohol, kind of trying to accomplish reform and stuff, you feel a bit combative. You feel a bit like the world doesn't care about these people. I'm the only one who
Mm.
cares. I'm the only one doing anything good. But to have the reader responses be so like overwhelmingly positive to this guy really just made me think, okay, people are actually like, they understand good people. Like, the
Yeah.
readers actually know, they appreciate this. Like, it's not, they didn't read this and think, I don't want to read about a drug dealer. They thought, this is a good man trying to do the best he can. And that was a really good moment for me, because I just had a bit more grace for people after that.
Awesome, man. I love it. So, I know from experience that all writers go through self doubt. How have you overcome this and continued on writing?
Uh, lots of ways I could answer that. One of them is what we call the sunk cost fallacy, or the gambler's fallacy, which is the idea that you chase your losses.
Yeah.
So the image given is a guy at the poker machine, sunk cost, gambler's fallacy. Oh, I've already put $20 into this. I better put another $1 in to try and get that 20 back.
Mm.
So you keep putting money in. Oh, I've just spent $100. I better put in another $100 to get my original $100 back. So for me, the Bluffs was the 11th manuscript I wrote. So
Mm.
I had been writing since I was 16, for a very long time. And I had given up a lot of money, a lot of time. And when I say a lot of money, I mean that I have only ever worked part-time in order to
Mm.
fund this habit. Like, I
Mm.
didn't spend any money on like, any other goals,
Mm.
um, just so I could write, because that was all I
Yeah.
wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so 10 years of rejections just made me think, man, I need to put in another 10 years just to get that time back.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that kept me going. Um, that kept me going at a more animal mercenary level. And then there was just the fact that it's my favorite thing to do, and I knew I had what it took. And it didn't mean I knew it was going to happen overnight. but I would have kept writing even if it took 20, 30 years, because I wanted to be a writer and I wanted it more than anything else. And I wasn't going to give up till I got there. So,
I love it, man. That's so inspiring. I love
yeah.
that. So this ties closely to my next question. What would you say would be a top tip for anyone looking to become an author?
Oh, mate.
Top tip doesn't have to be 10, just one.
All right. I'll give you the advice. I get asked this question pretty often.
Yeah.
And there's so many things that can be said, but this is my top tip for everyone listening, watching, who wants to be an author. There are 3 things you've got to do. You have to eat well, exercise, and get your sleep. Because if you don't have those 3 in place, you are not writing at your best capacity. You're not as resilient as you need to be. You can't focus. You can't time manage. Even just the simple matter of, a lot of people who are creative struggle to go to sleep. We don't prioritize it. We just want to hustle. It's counterproductive. And authors are shocking for it. We'll write up until 1 a.m. and then wonder why we can't write the next day. Whereas if you intentionally prioritize your sleep, go get some exercise, eat well, the effect it can have on your writing is quite literally double, triple, quadruple your output. And I'm not exaggerating. And it's all, like, we know it, it's all based on science.
Yeah, exactly.
So that, don't, all the other stuff, read a lot, write a lot, get feedback, join groups, decide what you're passionate about, plot, don't plot, all that's great.
Yeah.
You're not taking care of your body, which is your main instrument, then you're just wasting your time.
Love it, man. I agree with that. That's gonna be my top tip if I get to the stage, man.
Do it, man. Share it, spread it around, spread the gospel.
So finally, I love you to share with people how they can get in contact with you, not specifically you, but anyone who wants to learn about you and also get a hands-on copy of your books.
Great question. Okay, well, I have a website now, but the best way to see what I'm up to or engage with me is on my Instagram or Facebook page. So it's Kyle Perry Author. If you go kyleperryauthor.com.au, no, I think it's just kyleperry.com.au. You can get a link to my socials as well as to the page where you can see my books and where to buy them. If you want to buy them, I recommend going to your local independent bookseller, supporting local. However, they're available everywhere. You can get them at Big W. You can get them online. You can get them in Germany. So just go there and have a look. The audiobooks are great too. Very awesome cast who recorded the audiobooks. So no matter what your fancy is, there we have a Kyle Perry format to cater.
Awesome, Ryan. I'll put all those links that you said in the description box below YouTube. People can access it if you want to. But for everyone who's watching this, thanks so much for joining us. And if you'd like to meet with other awesome writers like Carl, remember to subscribe, check out our other videos. But thanks heaps for joining us, guys. It's been a pleasure doing this interview with you, Carl. And I hope we chat soon, when your next book comes out, The Wild.
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome, bro. Catch up.